So I do realize that this video is probably gonna be very controversial, as pretty much every video on this channel. But for this one, I want to say that this is just my opinion, this is just how I see this thing. So if you think differently, that's perfectly fine. I'm not here to convince you of anything. This is just my 2 cents into the conversation. Also, this video is a response to D'Angelo Wallace. He made a video on Shane Dawson, I think a month ago, and I really like the guy. I think he makes genuinely some of the best content on YouTube. But I think in that one video, he sort of fell into a confirmation bias, which means that I think he went into researching that video having already decided that Shane Dawson was a pedophile and Shane Dawson was racist, and he really only looked for evidence to confirm what he already believed. So for you to understand where I'm coming from, you have to understand that early 2010s YouTube was a very, very different place. I know that many people have said that while that's true, racism and pedophilia was not okay or funny back then, as it isn't okay now, which is perfectly true. But what I mean by early YouTube was very different is that back then, being a YouTuber wasn't a thing. There was no profession called YouTuber. If you were making content on YouTube, you were either a gamer or a comedian. People back then thought that the creators who were gonna make it on YouTube early were gonna leave and sort of transition into traditional media, which kind of happened, I guess, with Lily Singh, but we don't really talk about that. So I think Shane Dawson at the time, he sort of assumed the role. He was like, oh, I'm a comedian, alright, fine. But as he went on, he sort of realized that he was not funny at all. And because of that, he started relying on shock humor. He couldn't get reactions out of people with his jokes, so he decided to start saying things that he knew would get reactions because they were so outlandish and nobody else would say it. And I know that with today's mindset, this is super unrealistic. If you are not funny, you are not gonna make it as a comedian. But at the time, with early YouTube, having this young 20-something-year-old telling these shock jokes to young kids, it sort of worked. Actually, it really worked, and Shane Dawson became a very big name on YouTube. Now, I was never really a fan of Shane, but I always sort of knew about him. So every couple of years, I would check back on him to see what he's doing. And I remember in 2013-14, he was still doing the shock humor, but he had started a podcast. It was called the Shane Dawson and Friends podcast. I did watch an episode, and this was really the time when I formed my opinion on Shane. If you watch one of those episodes, I think Shane had taken all of them down, but if you go back, you can find re-uploads. Literally every single episode of that podcast is Shane Dawson saying something stupid and something that was meant to shock people. Then his co-host reacts to that with, oh Shane, you can't say that, we're gonna get in trouble. And then for the rest of the podcast, 30 minutes, an hour, I don't remember how long they were, Shane Dawson tries to outdo himself. He tries to say something even more shocking, then something even more shocking. And that is how you get the moments and the insane conversations that you have been seeing on Twitter. I don't think anything that Shane said in those podcasts was actually true, and I don't think he meant anything. I think it was more of a way to entertain people through his weird, fucked up shock humor. And you are right if you said that it's not funny and it's not entertaining, but at the time that was his character. But after doing it for an hour continuously, it really truly doesn't work. And I think Shane realized that too. And that's why he went into the new era of his YouTube channel, which is the yellow thumbnail videos. Basically, he was uploading every single day. It was on his second channel, which is his main channel now, I think, the Shane channel. And he did dumb, cheap, fast food content, basically. Fast food in terms of cheap, fast, easy to produce, and also fast food in him literally eating fast food in most of those videos. Now he was doing other stuff like making the biggest Oreos and eating galaxy themed food and that type of stuff. During this time, he actually became very successful. He was already well known, but it was during these videos that he would get 1 million views every single day on every single video. And I think that sort of made him realize that he doesn't actually need to be a comedian. He doesn't need to be funny. He can just be himself, as every YouTuber around him was doing at the time. And I think that success sort of gave him the push to later start doing the documentary style videos, which are really just long vlogs, but those are more personality based and really more based on the feelings of people rather than humor. One thing that I find very interesting is that even in his newer content, Shane Dawson still is not funny, but he still tries to be occasionally. The only difference is, what used to be jokes about kids and black people now turn into jokes about himself. His self-deprecating humor sort of replaced the shocking one, and now all he says is, oh, he hasn't showered, oh, his clothes have holes in them, and it's still not funny at all, and it's still very much filler. The only difference is that used to be his entire content, now is just a little part in the hour-long videos. So Shane Dawson, in his early YouTube career, has said a bunch of crazy, outlandish, shocking stuff. And I think people brand him because of that as a pedophile and as a racist. But I don't think that's necessarily true, because he didn't actually mean anything. That was his way of entertaining the people who followed him. And he already had a big following. If this was something driven by hate, and if it was something that was meant to put down other people, he wouldn't have had the following that he had at the time. People knew that this was a joke. But as Shane transitioned his public persona to a, loving empath that cares about everybody, his old videos really didn't fit the narrative of a joke anymore. They seem more like the actual thoughts of a person who has now learned how to conceal them and act holy and nice and very likable on camera. But I do think that his actual personality is closer to how he portrays himself right now compared to how he portrayed himself in the early 2010s. So all in all, I don't think Shane Dawson should have been cancelled for what he said and did in his past YouTube videos. However, I do think that he should be cancelled or at least held accountable for what he did in some of his newer videos. Those have caused a lot more damage to actual real people right now compared to the older content that he was producing. But I will talk about those in another video. Thank you for watching.